It's weird because we're in the middle of one readathon and I'm going to pause to tell you about another. But August is Women in Translation month, and next week, starting on August 25th and going to August 31st, Matthew Sharapa, Jennifer from Insert Literary Pun here, and Kendra Winchester are all hosting what's being called the Women in Translation Readathon. It's a 7-day opportunity to join with other booktubers and read more books that have been written by women in other languages and translated into English. So for the readathon, there are a few prompts, and the books that I'm going to share with you now are books that some of them I have read, or books that I'm currently reading or have on my sites. This is not my official TBR for the readathon. That's going to come later. I'm going to make another video. But these are some recommendations of books that I've read recently, or books that I have on my shelves or have heard really great things about, that if you don't know any titles that would fit the Women in Translation readathon, here are some suggestions of books that you might want to think about. So first is a book that I haven't read yet. I just got it, and it's Herta Muller's The Fox Was Ever the Hunter. Herta Muller is a German writer. She won the Nobel Prize for Literature, and this is not her most famous book, but it's gotten really great reviews. I'm going to be doing a buddy read of this one with Sean the Book Maniac. We just talked about it today, so I'm pretty excited to get started on this. I saw him haul it in a recent haul video that he did, and I was like, I just hauled that. Well, I haven't even posted my haul video yet, but I just bought it. So I'm looking forward to reading this Nobel Prize winner, and that's one of the prompts for the readathon. So before I tell you about the books, here are some of the prompts for the readathon, and as I'm telling you about the books, you might be able to think about which one of those prompts that book would fit into. First prompt is to read something that is not a novel. So a book of essays, poetry, a short story collection, a memoir, all of those are things that are not novels. Prompt number 2 is to read a book about childhood. Prompt number 3 is to read a book with red on the cover. Prompt number 4 is to read a text that is translated from a language that you haven't read a text translated from before. Now, if you're not a big consumer of Women in Translation books, then that could be anything. So for some of us who've read many books that have been translated, quite often we get books that were translated from French or German or Russian. And so you might look for a book that was translated from Urdu or Welsh or Greek or Hebrew. I don't know. Here are the bonus prompts. One is to read a book that was translated posthumously. So the author wrote the book, and after they died, it was translated into English. Or prompt number 2, bonus prompt number 2, is to read a book written by a Nobel laureate. So I'm going to start with my Nobel laureate book, which is my most recent acquisition. This is a book by Herta Muller, and it is The Fox Was Ever the Hunter. Herta Muller is pretty famous worldwide for her fiction, and this is her picture, and I've never read anything by her, and so reading this is something that I can cross off my Women in Translation readathon, but it's also a name that I can cross off my list of Nobel Prize winners for literature, because that's also one of my ongoing challenges. So this is a book that I haven't read yet, but that I want to recommend for lots of different reasons. So other books that I have read and enjoyed that were translated. This is a short story collection called Things We Lost in the Fire. It's by Marianna Enriquez. These stories are set in Argentina. The author is Argentinian, and I'm not sure if the book was first written in Spanish and then translated to English. No, this is her English language debut. However, she does write in Spanish, and I've seen this book available in Spanish as well. So technically, this is not a book that was translated to English, but the author does write in other languages, and this is her first time writing something in English. This is her English language debut, and it was a fantastic collection. The stories are dark and haunting and really engrossing, and if you haven't already heard about this book, definitely read this collection, especially the title story, which appears close to the back. These are stories, I mean, you can tell from the tabs that I put in them that these are stories that impacted me profoundly, and this is one that I'd recommend. Other books and authors that have written in other languages: Kang, she wrote The Vegetarian, and this one was translated to English by Deborah Smith, and this won her the Man Booker Prize in 2016. This is a story about a woman in Korea who she's living in this very patriarchal society, very male dominated, and she's one of those women who in her life she's been subject to the voices of her parents, and when she leaves home, the voice of her husband. And She makes a decision about her own life that she's gonna stop eating meat, but because of the restraints from her society and her life, she's not free to make that decision about herself, and so it causes these ripples throughout her family. Her husband becomes abusive, her family members become abusive, and eventually she starts to spiral into emotional and mental breakdown, which again affects the members of her family. And so it's this one woman's story of something that she should be able to do for herself and how it impacts those around her. What's really profound about this book is that the story is told from all these different perspectives, none of which are from the main character. And so we observe her through the eyes of others. Even though she's trying to speak for herself, even in the narrative, she's not able to. But this is also a dark and mystifying experience, because living as we do in this part of the world, I'm sure it's hard to imagine that someone would not be able to make this kind of choice for themselves. Haunting book, and I enjoyed it. However, the next book that was translated from this author is one that I enjoyed even more. And maybe I shouldn't use the word enjoy. This is Human Acts by the same author, Kang, same translator, Deborah Smith. This won her the Man Booker International Prize. This one failed to turn up on any lists except mine. This is a book that I counted as one of my favorite reads or most impactful reads of 2017. In this one, she tells the story of the Gwangju uprising in South Korea, where students rose up to protest a government coup, and the government turned against them, and an unknown number of young people were killed. Some of them children who were pretending to be older than they were, who had gotten caught up in the violence. And again, Kang tells the story from multiple perspectives, one of the perspectives being one of the kids that's killed. And there are concepts in this book that push the boundaries of things that I agree with and things that I'm able to recommend. However, this is such an impactful read. Human Acts tells a real story, but it's written by someone who's not old enough to have remembered the real event. And so it's an imagined experience that is still so haunting that it feels like the author was right there, and it feels like she's inviting the reader to relive this experience along with her. Profound and tragic reality of the oppression that people face in different parts of the world. I recommend this book highly. It's a book that I've been recommending ever since I read it, and I still am doing so, especially for this readathon, because the author is female and her translator is female. So any of these books that you pick up by Kang, her most recent book is called The White Book, which I haven't read yet. I'm saving that. So any one of these I recommend. The next book I'm going to tell you about is one that I haven't read yet, but it comes highly recommended by subscribers as well as other booktubers, and that's The Elegance of the Hedgehog by Muriel Barberry. This one is translated from the French. The author is female and the translator is also female. It tells the story of two women as well, the concierge in a hotel and a young resident, a 12-year-old girl. Both of these women are hiding who they really are from the rest of the world, and a Japanese man, I think, moves into the hotel as well, and the relationship that develops between the two women, but also as it extends to their relationship with this new resident in the hotel, kind of pushes both of these women to expose themselves to the rest of the world, expose their talents, expose their gifts in a way that this man has been able to draw them out of the shells that they would rather cocoon themselves in. I'm looking forward to reading this story. I don't want to know too much more about it. It comes highly recommended. For me, that's good enough. And I hope it's also good enough for you to pick this one up. Another book that I read late last year and want to reread, it is The Bridge of Beyond by Simone Schwartz-Bart. This one is introduced by Jamaica Kincaid, who's one of my favorite Caribbean American authors. And Simone Schwartz-Bart, she's French, but I think she was born in Guadeloupe. And so this book is set in Guadeloupe, which is an island in the French Antilles. And it tells the story of several generations of women, female-led families, and the relationship that develops between these women and their daughters, and the generational curses that continue through the ages because these women are not able to really own up to who they are and haven't passed on the lessons that they should have been learning from their mistakes onto the ones who are coming after them. This book was first published in 1972, and I love that the New York Review of Books has brought back some of these older books and reprinted them with just such beautiful editions that you want to just pick them up and own them and read them. So this is one that I recommend as a book that takes place in the French Caribbean. And again, this one has a female author and a female translator. So if you're looking to only include books that have both of those specifications, then this is one that qualifies. Other books that have been translated, I have The Housekeeper and the Professor by Yoko Ogawa. And this one was translated from Japanese. The author is female, the translator is male. And this one tells the story of a man a professor who's had an accident, and so he's lost his ability to remember things in the short term. And a housekeeper is hired to tend to his day-to-day needs, and she brings her young son to work with her, and a relationship develops between the professor and the housekeeper, as well as between the professor and the housekeeper's son. This novel is small, and in classic Japanese style, it's pretty sparsely told, where there isn't a lot of emphasis on intimate things. However, the story tells and captures very beautifully a love story that develops between all the characters in this book, and it pushes the boundary of what you expect to be love. Not just the classic definition of romantic love, but the kind of love that one can experience even when the capacities of the people involved are limited. So how can a man who can't remember the people around him, how can he still love? And how can a person who never really gets to know someone, can they really love that person? Beautifully told story, and I recommend it. This one did the rounds on Booktube a couple of years ago. And if you didn't read it then, definitely read it now. And of course, this wouldn't be a video to promote women in translation if I didn't talk about the woman in translation who I've read the most from, and that's Elena Ferrante. From the end of last year to the beginning of this year, I read 4 of her books, the Neapolitan novels, which comes in 4 parts. This is the first of those books. My Brilliant Friend is the beginning of that series. A story that starts with these 2 girls, and we follow them through the various arcs and trajectories of their life as their friendship grows and pushes them together as well as apart, and the other relationships that they find themselves engrossed in and how they change, whether in their relationships with each other or the kinds of changes that they exhibit towards other people, even while they're lying to themselves or lying to the people around them. This is Bildungsroman genre of the nth degree. I don't know how Elena Ferrante was able to capture with such vivid accuracy the characteristics of all these different times and periods of a person's life. At every age and stage of these characters' lives, it felt like we were experiencing life along with them. So when they were children, they were really children. When they were teenagers, they were real teenagers. With all of the fights and all of the drama that went on in their lives, it felt like that was real. And when they became adults, at the various ages and stages of adulthood, it also felt so authentic. And this is a series that I recommend so highly based on that. The first book was not perfect, but if you tried this series and only read the first book, I definitely recommend that you continue, that you read the whole series before you make a judgment and say, nah, I don't like that. This author, she does immersion in a character. She does it really well. I mean, I felt some things along these characters that I didn't know that I could feel in a book. So I recommend Elena Ferrante. For this readathon, I'm gonna try to read something else by her. Maybe not a novel, maybe one of her essay collections, or maybe one of her children's books. I'm not sure yet. I do still have some research and thinking and planning to do before I settle on my readathon TBR. But these are some books that I would recommend if you're thinking about what you could read for the Women in Translation readathon. These are some books that you might want to think about. It's Karen from the future, and I just finished Pippi Longstocking by Astrid Lindgren, and I had to tell you that this is also translated fiction because the author first wrote this in Swedish, I think. And so if you're looking for a book about children for the Women in Translation month, may I suggest Pippi Longstocking? So leave me a comment down below. Let me know if you've read any of these titles, what you think, or give me a recommendation of a book that you think I would enjoy reading during Women in Translation readathon next week. Or listen, not just for the readathon, I'm always up to reading a book that was translated from another language so that maybe I could learn something about another culture. I'm always up for that. So leave me a comment down below. We'll talk down there. And until next time, until we come back with the Readathon official TBR, thanks for watching and happy reading. Bye.